Welcome back to the Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast, your hub for everything off-road, dual sport, and adventure motorcycle. My name is John. I will be your host. This is episode number 20, Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast. Thank you for joining, thank you for listening, and thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast. I can't believe it. Made it to episode number 20. Thanks, guys. Now, I hope you didn't get your hopes too high. We're not going to talk to our friend Keith today, who is riding through Baja. I tried to connect with Keith last night. I was actually able to record the call, but his connection wasn't very good, and the tongue-tied here. The call quality is pretty poor, and it's not something I'd want to put out there. So I'm going to try to connect with Keith again on Tuesday night, and I hope to update you guys on what he's got going on. That being said, he's down there with 24 other riders, enjoying margaritas, good food, 70-degree weather, and some, a good mix of technical trails and road riding and just the sights of Baja. So don't worry about Keith. He's doing all right. He's not in 11-degree Maryland today. He's down in Baja, and he mentioned that there was a... I don't want to say tsunami, but let's just say there was a lot of rainfall in that part of the world here last month, and Keith said the colors are just outstanding with all the water they got. So picture yourself sunny Mexico this time of year, beautiful colors and amazing riding, and that is what Keith's doing. He's doing quite well. So there's your update on that. Last week I received an email from D in Utah. Now I don't know if that is a pseudonym or if that is your name, D, but again, listener out of Utah, thank you for the email. I like to read all of these personally. I have sent you a response. It may be in your spam folder. Not uncommon for that to happen, but I wanted to read this email verbatim to you guys. Dear Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast, to start, I just wanted to say thank you for providing a dual sport podcast. Until yours, all the other podcasts I listen to, even though they are great, really only focus on either dirt biking or adventure riding. While some overlook the dual sport crowd, you do not. I've enjoyed listening to what I as a listener would consider well-qualified industry experts and enthusiasts. If I wanted uneducated, strong opinions, I would go to an online forum. I hear you there. As a previous owner of a KLR 650, I am wanting to get back into riding, but on something lighter and quicker, but also know that can come at a cost with a more frequent maintenance schedule. However, with the new technologies that manufacturers are bringing to the table, like fuel injection mapping, engine tuning via the ECU, I am seriously considering investing in a 2019 WR450F. My thought is I can detune the engine for the distance between trail riding and then tune it back up when I get there, all from my smartphone, thus extending my maintenance schedule at least by a few hours. My podcast listing is 100% education. My podcast listing is 100% educational, but it helps when it's fun as well, for one of two reasons: researching topics I would like to get into and further expanding upon things I already enjoy. So why am I sharing this? To keep you informed in an attempt to hear your views, research, expert opinions on this matter on the podcast. Because chances are, if it's something I want to hear, others do as well. Right on, D from Utah. Again, D, thank you for the email, and like I said, I shot you a reply. Hopefully you've received that. 2019 WR450F, I think that's a great option. It's not something that I could get plated here in the state of Oregon without a stroke of luck, so it really wouldn't be an option for me, but I know Yamaha's got a good, reliable platform, and I think that bike would be, versatile, on an adventure ride or on a trail ride. Either way, I think you would be happy. Myself, I'm pretty partial to the newer KTM dual sports. I'm not so much concerned about a maintenance schedule. I do routine oil changes and things like that. I've got a couple hundred hours on one of my 500s with no valve adjustments, no issues other than just changing the oil, and did replace one fork seal. So service intervals, not really something that I worry about. I know Honda's making a hard sell on that with their CRF 450 dual sport, and let's be honest, they have to lean on something because that bike is rather heavy compared to some of its competitors. So that's supposed to be a selling point for that machine. I would have the same concerns about a WR450. Again, I think it's a great platform. I've owned a bunch of Yamahas. They're bulletproof. They're super reliable. But when you stack that bike up against a modern day KTM or Husqvarna dual sport, it outweighs it considerably. And as far as the fuel injection and the tuning and all the options on the KTM and Huskies, I don't know that you can get a much more versatile bike for what you're going to do. I mean, great example. Last week I took an adventure ride. I believe it was on Wednesday. Did a couple 100 miles across the plateaus here in Central Oregon. Thursday I was just going to go out and screw around. And I ended up on some very technical single track on my 500, weighted down with the bags and everything, and it took it all in stride. So that is a really versatile machine that crosses over well. And I think whoever buys that bike's going to serve them well. The 350 option is obviously 150 less cc's, is a little bit lighter, a few pounds lighter, but also a really fun bike to ride. So if I were you, I would definitely consider those. And I'm not knocking the Honda either. I think that's a great platform. If you can get the WR plated, and that's really where your heart is set, that would be a great option for you down in Utah. But until somebody makes something that is comparable in weight to the KTMs and Huskies that we have now, I don't think anything else for me will really be an option. But again, that's just what I know right now works best for me. We rent these KTMs quite frequently here in Central Oregon, and most of my clients admittedly rent them for off-road use. And again, they're lightweight, they're versatile, so they cross over very well. And then when I picture the rides that I tour people on, at least locally, they're usually a mix of trails and some type of adventure riding, a little bit of dual sport stuff. So the KTM works really well for me. It may not work well for you or others. I wouldn't shy away from Honda's offerings, Yamaha's offerings, Beta's offerings. I'm pretty sure I could make any of those bikes work. But the KTM is just like, right now for us, it's a glove that fits really well. I've got 4 of them in the garage. Everything, same parts, same layout, really easy to work on. So that's just what we're using, and I'm very comfortable. I have my own, and I've put thousands of miles on it without issues. So that's really the main selling point to me. That's really why I tell people or recommend KTMs above other brands. I've just had a great deal of luck and success on those motorcycles. All right, just one more thing before we move on from your email, D, again, which I really appreciate, but you kind of, you reminded me, or you planted the seed about, we're going to get very aggressive on YouTube here in the spring and summer of 2019. We're going to secure some better camera equipment, and we want to provide, instructional videos, tutorials, gear reviews, product reviews, things of that nature. And I don't think that, new bikes are exempt from the equation either. Obviously, I can't afford to buy every new make and model and lose a bunch of money. But I think some of the high-profile ones we could definitely get our hands on and, provide some video content on and podcast content on. So what I have in mind, Honda's new dual sport, I really need to see for myself what it's all about. I'm tired of reading all the reviews. We need something thorough and honest. I know for a fact that our YouTube channel will be one of those that has some of the first bits of legitimate hands-on information for the KTM 790 Adventure R this year, because we're going to get one and I'm going to ride it a lot and thoroughly review it. And if it sucks, I'll let you know that it sucks, and then I'll probably sell it. But again, YouTube platform, podcasting platform in 2019, we're definitely looking to step up our game and definitely produce better videos than what we have now, which is basically helmet cam content. And, though YouTube is a great way to listen to the podcast because it's the first place that it goes each and every week. But again, D, thank you for the email. I really appreciate that. And if anybody else wants to reach out with some feedback or, give me a tongue lashing for what I've said or whatever the case may be, benmotorcycleadventures@gmail.com. Be happy to read your email and try to answer your questions. Try to give some analysis on that feedback. Thank you. So sticking with today's dual sport theme, and you guys can thank D for that. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about my ride through or on the Idaho Backcountry Discovery Route in the summer of 2018, and some of the events leading up to and in preparation for that particular ride. I don't remember when I really got the itch to go, but ultimately I think I set off right there around the end of August. I was well aware of all the backcountry discovery routes, and I'd actually been looking long and hard at the tour of Idaho. That's a pretty technical, kind of gnarly ride through the state of Idaho that's put on by an individual, if you will. But ultimately decided to settle on riding the Idaho backcountry discovery route, which is, well, it's really easy to follow. You can go to ridebdr.com. You can get a lot of information about the route. You can download the tracks, and admittedly, I'm pretty sure I could ride a street bike on the entire route if I wanted to. It's not terribly technical or difficult. There's a couple sidebar trips that I'd probably be sketched out to take a really large adventure bike on, but for the most part, it's pretty smooth sailing, and you get to visit some of the most remote spots in the state, and you ride through the entire state of Idaho. So it's really something to see. Now, my initial plan was to actually ride the last leg of the Nevada backcountry discovery route from Elko to Jarbidge. And then I was going to ride through the entire length of Idaho, cut across, drop down the Washington backcountry discovery route, and then find my way back home on the Oregon backcountry discovery route, which has a lot of different options. But that was the initial plan. Unfortunately, I didn't get to ride that whole leg, which I'll do soon. But just a kind of a couple things going on there. Going late in August, the forest fires had really grabbed hold. I even had a couple kind of miserable days in Idaho due to air quality, and I had to route around a couple of forest fires. But they had really, really grabbed hold in the state of Washington, and personally, I just wouldn't have felt good about riding out there, considering the state of the forest fires and the emergencies. So opted to not do that. Also had some business here in the state of Oregon. I had clients come in out of New York and I want to say maybe Boston around that time, but we had some people come for some local rides. So I had some business to do too. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm kind of a maybe you could call me a motorcycle diva, but I like new motorcycles. I seem to end up getting 2 or 3 new bikes every single year, and there was just no way that I could set off on the Idaho BDR on one of my 2017 KTM 350s or 500s. So went to my favorite local dealership, Power Motorsports in Sublimity, Oregon. They hooked me up with a good deal on a 2018 KTM 500, and I proceeded to build that out with more of an adventure riding, mindset. I got help from Works Connection with foot pegs and protection and brake caps and things like that. Moto-minded with an amazing headlight and bezel, just in case I got caught out after dark. I think that's really important. The stock KTM headlights are, well, you might as well be riding with a flashlight. So Moto-minded and Baja Designs hooked me up there, and that actually was really nice for the day that I left Bergdorf Hot Springs before daylight. Golden Tire hooked me up with a set of GT723Rs. Those were amazing. I still run those today. Wolfman set me up with the luggage, which I really come to love. I was out riding trails the other day, and I didn't even take those things off. You don't notice they're there, and they really serve a purpose. So to everyone that kind of helped get the bike set up for the ride, really appreciate that. And yeah, I just built that thing up. I went on a couple of I'll call them shakedown rides beforehand, but those were on pavement. I was just riding here locally on pavement to kind of break the bike in. If you're wondering what that looks like for me, I usually ride the bike, 5-10 minutes, let it cool down completely, maybe ride at 15, let it cool down completely. Just kind of heat cycle the engine a number of times, change the oil, get that break-in fluid out of there, put fresh oil in it again, do another cycle and change the oil again. That's really what the break-in cycle looks like for me. And then I just make sure that I'm not, clutching the crap out of the bike early on or revving the crap out of it or whatever you want to call it. I'm mindful of the fact that I have a new bike early on and just kind of slowly work it in. That's worked for me throughout the years. But yeah, had a brand new 2018 KTM 500 set up, and there toward the end of August, we set off for Elko, Nevada, where I was going to start. Was kind of bummed out when we rolled into Elko, which from home here, I think that was about a 7 7 to 8 hour drive. Thankfully, speed limits are a little more forgiving in Nevada. Most of the roads were pretty straight, so we made great time. But I'm not kidding you. When I walked into the hotel room or walked into the hotel lobby in Elko, I literally saw on the TV screen that there was a huge fire. Or actually, let me rewind that. I knew there was a fire near Jarbidge, which is where I would be staying my first night on the ride. And it actually called the hotel motel there in Jarbidge just to verify that they were going to stay open considering the fire. And I believe they told me something like, hey, the fire is 10 miles away. Come on out. We're going to be open. I was like, well, 10 miles, that's not that far away, but I'm going to take your word for it. But now fast forward to me walking into the hotel lobby, seeing the TV screen lit up with a bunch of information about the fire, and it shows all this area that's now closed. And, I do a lot of reconnaissance research on the ride. I immediately knew that right where I was going to plan to ride through, all that stuff was closed. So there's no way I was traveling through there. And now it was kind of, it was time for a plan B. I was a little bit disappointed. Did some more research online, Facebook pages for the national forest in the area and everything. And yeah, they verified that section that I need to travel through was most definitely closed. You're most definitely at risk, and you would be in a lot of trouble if you were caught back in there. So not worth the risk, and on to plan B, which ultimately ended up being driving to Glens Ferry, Idaho the next day and starting my trip there. I didn't see any reason to drive down to Jarbidge or even try to get close. So the next day we drove to Shoshone Falls in Idaho, which is amazing. I'd never been there. That was worth it. And then I took off from Glens Ferry, Idaho, and that was all after a nice night of gambling in the town of Elko. If you know me, don't mind put a little bit of money into the slot machines every now and then. Anyway, yeah, I got dropped off in Glens Ferry and started my ride. Unfortunately, it kind of shrunk the first day down for me. I love to cover a lot of miles and see a lot of ground. And that second day from Jarbidge to Pine, Nevada, or actually, let me rewind here. So the first day I was going to ride Elko to Jarbidge. It was like 100 miles or so. No big deal. Nice little shakeout ride. Second day, I had slotted myself to ride Jarbidge, Nevada to the Sourdough Lodge, which is in Lowman, Idaho. I think that was around 265 miles. So everything kind of got condensed first couple of days for me. So I rode like 65 miles from Glens Ferry to Pine, Idaho. But it was a nice introduction to the Idaho backcountry discovery route for me. As soon as I took off, it's that amazing sense of freedom and the wonder, what's around the next bend. So I didn't waste a ton of time covering the 60 miles. I just kept wanting to see, what was around every turn. It was hot. If you know that portion of Idaho like I do, that summer is not your friend down there. But yeah, we kind of started the slow climb into the mountains and rode toward Pine and Anderson Ranch Reservoir, which day one, that was pretty impressive. If you've been on the Idaho BDR or if you're planning on it, don't overlook the Anderson Ranch Reservoir. The day that I rode through there, it was amazingly calm, amazingly flat. The water was a shade of blue that I have never seen in my life. It was just amazing. So I think you wind along the reservoir for about 20 miles and ultimately find yourself in the little town of Pine. And I just so happened to be staying at the Hayhurst Inn bed and breakfast. There was a couple other couples there that were staying, but for the most part, it was pretty empty. So after I settled into my room, made my way into town, if you want to call it that, just a few people that live in the area and found a little place to eat, a little restaurant, and just kind of settled in for the night. Day one, like I said, it was about 60 to 65 miles. I most definitely should recommend the Hayhurst Inn bed and breakfast there in Pine. If you're going to ride the Idaho BDR, if you're just in that neck of the woods, you want a great place to stay. It's this huge log cabin lodge. I mean, they've got hot tub, sauna, pool table, man, pretty much everything you could ever think of is there. And again, it's this huge log cabin lodge overlooking the lake. Great place to stay and really, really great host there. So like I said, if you're in the area or if you're doing the ride, I can confirm that is a great place to stay. And you can also get gas just a mile or two down the road in Pine. And there's a little restaurant and bar down there too, just as a heads up. Now day 2 was a little bit lengthier, but again abbreviated due to the fires and kind of the schedule change I had to make. So day 2 I was riding from Pine to Lowman, which I didn't really know much about Lowman, but the day I got a late start. I wasn't in a particularly large hurry, seeing as how I was just covering 120, 130 miles. So I think I actually took off about 9 or 10 after they made us breakfast there at the bed and breakfast. They started off kind of uneventful, a little bit of slab, veered off at the little town of Featherville, and then kind of started winding my way up into, I believe, the Boise Mountains. Ultimately ended up riding up to Trinity Mountain, which is a side trip on the Idaho BDR if you want. And a lot of people talk about this or ask about this. The day I rode to the top of Trinity Mountain, and again, I'm on a KTM 500, so it's light, it's maneuverable, but the road is, it's not really a road, but it is fairly steep. It was fairly technical the day I was on it because they had just, I was told they just had a cat on it. So they dug up all these huge boulders, so it was kind of rough and pretty steep and rocky and all that, but really no problem. But if you're on something like a KTM 1290, you may think twice about it. I'm not sure, but the ride up to Trinity was amazing. I think it's over 9,000 feet. There's a huge lookout up there. You can look all across the mountain ranges, near and far. Unfortunately, it was kind of smoky the day I was up there, but I did talk to the fire watch, if you will, for a while and hung out on top. So that was kind of a nice way to get the ride started. Day 2, it's like, hey, here's Idaho. You're just getting underway, and this is what it's going to be like the entire way. So that was pretty excellent. After spending some time at Trinity, it was a long wind down to the Middle Fork of the Boise River. Ugh, pardon me. It was a long wind down to the Middle Fork of the Boise River. Kind of boring riding initially. Once you lost elevation from Trinity Mountain, there wasn't a ton of things to see. But I'll always remember dropping down onto the Middle Fork of the Boise. It was kind of a weird shift for me mentally or something. It's like it finally dawned on me that I was out there all by myself. All I could hear was the river. I could look around. There were some amazing sights, but it was just me totally alone. And it was amazing. The river was beautiful. There was a little bit of a breeze on an otherwise hot day. And I tell you what, that's a place, it's always going to kind of be embedded in my brain, embedded in my soul. It's one of those places that I'll have to get back to just to relive it. It was just so beautiful there. I'll never forget that. And again, here we are just a couple days into this thing, and I'm seeing these amazing things and having some really, really cool experiences. So spent a lot of time on that bridge, enjoying the river, got a snack, melted power bar, flirted with the idea of getting in the river, but I guess I didn't want to put in that much work. But from there, you travel west along the Middle Fork of the Boise, climb over another pass, and then I believe we were on the North Fork. Then I believe I found myself on the North Fork of the Boise River. Equally as beautiful, equally as stunning, but you don't ride alongside the North Fork of the Boise for too long before you shift north and start heading toward Lowman. So I hadn't gotten too far away from the river, and this was the first time that I actually encountered some other people doing the ride. By chance, they were headed southbound. There was 3 of them. And, when I wrapped up the ride, I think I'd met 25 other riders, 21 of which were actually headed southbound. So they're riding from the north portion of Idaho down to Jarbidge. And the bulk of them that I talked to were actually Canadian. So there's a lot of people coming down from Canada and riding the route southbound. But it was cool to know that I wasn't out there alone. A little while after that, there's a road closure, which I don't believe is documented on the Ride BDR site, but it was talked about quite a bit on the ADV Rider. But I rode out to the closure just to see if by chance it had been open And it wasn't. There's a gate, there's a sign, the road is clearly closed, and it basically says, hey, if you ride behind this sign, if you ride behind this gate, you run the risk of, I think it was a $10,000 fine, 6 months in prison, neither of which really sound that appealing to me. So I turned around, did some rerouting, looked at the map, and ultimately ended up out on what was that, Highway 21. So this road actually serpentines down into Loman. There's quite an elevation drop. And you know what? When I do the Idaho BDR again, I'll probably take the dirt option to Loman. But this, once you break away from the North Fork of the Boise, you can ride out to Highway 21. And it is one of the best blacktop stretches I've ever ridden. I don't know what the elevation drop is, probably 4,000 feet into Loman. But it serpentines down, really windy switchback asphalt, and it's really beautiful. There's some amazing views. So despite the fact of kind of missing out on that last dirt section of the day, I didn't really miss anything in terms of views. Ultimately ended up in Loman, and then I had to ride, I believe it was about another 12 miles up to the Sourdough Lodge where I was staying. Regrettably, I should have brought a tent on this ride, and the accommodations were really affordable, and that's why I just stuck with lodging. But there's some amazing campgrounds along the river here on the way to the Sourdough Lodge, and that's the Payette River. But there's hot springs, awesome camping. There wasn't a ton of people up there. It would really be a great place to camp. It'd be a great place to camp to just drive through the area and camp for the evening or something. So either way, I wasn't going to sleep under the stars. Didn't have a sleeping bag or a tent or anything. So I rode up to the Sourdough Lodge, which was actually a great place to stop and kind of where we'll end this podcast and this adventure for now. But Sourdough Lodge, they have gas, they have a restaurant, there's a store there, lodging, little motel room. Everything's right there. So if you're going to ride Idaho and you're going to stop somewhere in this area, and I think most people are going to hold up somewhere near Loman just based on, proximity to the next available accommodations, I would look hard at the Sourdough Lodge because everything you need is right there. It's really convenient. It's not that far out of the way, especially if you're using that dirt route down into Loman because it drops you down further up the Payette. But refilled the bike, refueled the body, and kick back and watch some TV. I made mention of this in my blog post, but when I was refilling my bike, I met a couple gentlemen who were also adventure riders. One was on an Africa Twin, one was on a Husqvarna 701, and we struck up a conversation. They were both, I think they lived in Boise or somewhere like that. But one guy gave me a cell phone number and said, hey, if you get into trouble, give me a call. I'll come get you. So I plugged his number into my phone and plugged him into my Garmin InReach too. And, I didn't have any issues, right? But it was nice to meet those kind of people out there, guys that were familiar with the route, and just another helping hand if something went wrong or it broke a wheel or anything like that. Just had another resource out there. So that's just another testament to the motorcycle community. That being said, I think we'll go ahead and close out this episode of the podcast right here. 2 days on the Idaho BDR in my rear view, sitting at the Sourdough Lodge with a 250 mile and 300 mile day in front of me. Day 3 was exciting. It was amazing. The dreaded skull and crossbones, at least on ADV Rider. Water crossings on day 3, Magruder Corridor day 4. We'll talk about that on a future episode of the podcast, but I kind of wanted to walk you guys through this route and kind of tell you why I'm so passionate about it. It's really an amazing ride. BenMotorcycleAdventures.com, that is our website. Again, go to our blog, catch up on any of our previous episodes of the podcast, all that written content. I think there are 6 blog posts there about the Idaho BDR also. So if you're interested in going on that ride, doing a solo trip on that ride, whatever the case may be, I've got a ton of information there. And again, we will follow up with future episodes of this podcast, kind of recounting and reliving some of my days on the Idaho backcountry discovery route. BenMotorcycleAdventures@gmail.com. Always appreciate the questions. Always appreciate the feedback. Maybe you've got a question about the Idaho BDR. Shoot it my way. We'll cover it on the next episode of the podcast. Until then, thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. Episode number 20. That is also in the rear view, and we'll see you for episode number 21. Again, thank you guys for listening.